According to projections by the United Nations, Africa will have 4 billion inhabitants in 2100, against just over 1 billion currently. It is therefore not surprising that the link between the population and the development of the continent has aroused and renewed interest in recent decades, notably through the African Union Roadmap on the Demographic Dividend adopted in January 2017. A continental ambition aimed at transforming Africa's predominantly young population, half of whom are under the age of 25, driving sustainable economic growth. In the framework of the popularization of the stakes with this continental scale, the UNFPA, the United Nations Population Fund, recently invited Brussels-based communication professionals and artists from across the continent to reinforce the mobilization and the political commitment to the demographic dividend and the perpetuation of these gains.
Communicators have a central role, especially in order to raise awareness and contribute to social and mental change in our approach. As Africans, we are used to saying that this is our tradition. We inherited from our parents. But the issue of poverty and education is central. Women are at the center of the development project. This will be achieved through a paradigm shift, change of behavior and change in strategies. Africa will advance by mastering what Africa really wants. Africa will not wait for everything from abroad. Africa can receive, Africa can also give, and eradicate poverty means that we cannot be victims. We must be actors.
Having spent the first half of my career in communications, I think the media is a really important partner in the overall discussion, because the media is a conduit to actually reaching the broader community. And by working in partnership with journalists and the media as a business also, we have an opportunity to really to pick apart and to create language so that the average person understands the benefit of some of the complex issues behind the demographic dividend, and we have an opportunity to really create some clear messaging that helps to facilitate the discussion between all of the various partners that are so critical to be able to address and fulfill the opportunities and the promise of the demographic dividend.
This meeting aimed to better equip communication professionals on the progress of the implementation of the African Union Roadmap on the capture of the demographic dividend was also used to promote innovative approaches such as the SWEDE, the empowerment of women, and the demographic dividend project in the Sahel. The SWEDE, launched in 6 countries in the sub-Saharan Africa, intends to accelerate the demographic transition by reducing child fertility and mortality and reducing gender inequality. But scaling up such a project across the continent will require significant investments in policies and programs to encourage fewer families, appropriate youth training, and access to employability.
Ce concept qui va avec la planification familiale,
with family planning, with good health of the populations, with girls' education, with human rights, is now essential for the development of African countries. We journalists, we are the channel for the people to be informed. At this level, it was important for us to have this information, because how can you inform your readers if yourself are not permitting the concepts? Music is the best communication vector. The proof is that the intellectual locks themselves up in rooms, having meetings in air-conditioned offices, while the artists are in the field with a little song, and their message remains eternal. This is why it is very important today to use music, to use the traditional communicators, each in his own field and each in his local language, in order to be able to promote the program. This will also allow the program to have relays in place, so that once we go back home, there will be the one who must continue to carry the message. In an effort to reflect on how best to attract the private investment needed to transform the continent, the Rebranding Africa Forum chose this year to explore the challenges facing African financial systems in the face of the demographic dividend. For its fourth edition, this event, which aims to be a laboratory on the questions and hopes of Africa, brought together in Brussels, the capital of institutional Europe, personalities from the financial, economic, political and scientific fields to proposals and coordinated strategies for the development of the continent.
Pendant le forum, de permettre et d'obliger un peu les médias à voir une autre image de l'Afrique.
During the forum, there was talk about allowing and kind of forcing the media to have a different image of Africa. So to talk about a positive Africa, its potentials, its economic initiatives that you see, and of course, to change the media agenda. This is what we precisely call to compel, because as it is generally said, bad news is good news. We try to speak about a positive Africa and make sure that the media talk about it for at least one day. Regarding the other element, the Rebranding Africa Forum is also a meeting of business opportunities for African and European entrepreneurs, but in a win-win situation because they give African companies the opportunity to be on the same starting point and negotiations with European companies. They've met on the spot.
Que pour positiver l'Afrique, le Rebranding Africa constitue un cadre
To have a positive image of Africa, Rebranding Africa is an innovative framework, a space for relevant dialogue and a melting pot of new alternatives. That is why young people must be at the forefront and at the same time act as an active force in key sectors of development, including entrepreneurship and employment, education, health, including the issue of sexual and reproductive health, especially family planning and good governance to ensure transparency and accountability.
pour garantir la transparence et la redevabilité.
As a showcase for African innovators and entrepreneurs, the Rebranding Africa Forum provided a platform for exchanges to create synergies and partnerships that could transform the continent's demographic weight into an asset of development. It also allows advocacy in order to stimulate the involvement of African financial systems.
Le facteur démographique sur le continent africain constitue une réalité à la fois sociale.
The demographic factor on the African continent is a social, economic and political reality that must be regarded by all as a real opportunity, but also an important challenge. Successful demographic transition and development require the resolution of complex and multifaceted challenges. Above all, it requires the commitment of all development actors in order to provide a lasting response and to transform this social situation into an economic reality favorable to progress, peace and cohesion.
En réalité économique favorable au progrès, à la paix et à la cohésion.
Par le partenariat dans tous les domaines.
Through partnership in all fields, starting with those relating to family, education, health, everything that is a priority for citizens, be they European, Belgian or African, and by creating partnerships, creating strong and lasting links between populations, between people, we'll be able to face these various challenges, which must be seen as an opportunity. And the Prime Minister has said there are ideas of microcredit, meso-financing, the relaunch of activities. I believe that we must always see challenges as opportunities, and together, when we mobilize, we can meet those challenges.
Lorsqu'on se mobilise, on peut relever ces défis.
Capital humain, c'est vraiment, comme je vous disais à l'instant, notre plus grande richesse.
Human capital is, as I told you just now, our greatest wealth. We have heard of a figure in excess of 400 million people between the ages of 15 and 35. This represents an extraordinary opportunity, but also a risk to the stability of the continent, because it was proven that 40% of young people who find themselves without opportunity are on the road to destabilization, and we also know the road to migration that brings certain risks. So the need for action is really urgent in order to create jobs, to ensure that all of our young people have access to education that truly prepares them for the job market today and tomorrow. Governments cannot act alone. All they can do is to put in place the environment and public reforms so that all the other actors in the society can take charge of their responsibilities. So there is an enormous potential in the private sector as well, as in terms of job creation, but also educational opportunities, as we talked about it on the panel, also in terms of health and family planning in order to ensure the availability of all the services that women need. These two meetings have strengthened the involvement of the private sector, communication actors, and other stakeholders in the operationalization of the demographic dividend in Africa. They also provided an opportunity for intergenerational dialogue to lay the foundations for efficient and effective investment in youth and to lay the foundation for reflection on the sustainability of existing initiatives such as the Swede, through their scaling up at the national and continental level.
For UNFPA, it was very good to see that these partnerships of investing in young people towards the demographic dividend are paying off. We met young entrepreneurs who formed their business to help solve community problems and give jobs to each other. It was creative, it was exciting to see what is being done by Africans for Africans. The last thing I'd like to say is that UNFPA is very committed to making sure that not a single mother dies during childbirth. And in Africa, a lot of the people who die in childbirth are not women, they're actually girls, they're adolescent girls. This is why we're so very, very committed to making sure that important life-saving information is given to all of our children. We want them to be happy, we want them to be healthy, we want them to finish their schooling, we want them to be able to be productive. And sexual and reproductive health and their rights is a very important part of that. So for us, being able to partner with all of you has been a signal that we're on the right track.
Tout le monde est convaincu, tout le monde est mobilisé.
Everyone is convinced, everyone is mobilized. We have developed a guide for programming the demographic dividend. There is this strong mobilization of all sections of society, and now we have to take action, actions that alone are capable of changing people's lives. The good news is that we have the SWEAT initiative, which is a practical experience of how to capture the demographic dividend in the countries of the Sahel.
Dans les pays du Sahel. Donc nous avons aujourd'hui tout ce dont nous avons besoin.
So today we have everything we need to scale up to the level of the 6 SWEAT countries for the expansion of current initiatives which are timid, but they have nevertheless helped us and showed us how the capture of the demographic dividend must be conducted. We must replicate this initiative throughout the continent, where we have the challenge of believing demographic pulls everything down.
Démographique, en tout cas qui tire tout vers le bas.
Exploiting the demographic dividend will help transform the continent and achieve sustainable development goals as well as the Agenda 2063 through investments in favor of the youth. This youth will have to act as the main lever of resilience to address the root causes of inequality, instability, vulnerability, and insecurity, including forced migration, crime, radicalization, exploitation, and violent extremism.